session will be led by Dr. Anindita Majumdar, who is faculty at IIT, that is, of course, the Indian Institute of Technology, Hyderabad. She researches commercial surrogacy, kinship, and infertility, and her book, Transnational Commercial Surrogacy and the Unmaking of Kin in India, was shortlisted for the Bloomsbury LSC Social Anthropology Monograph Award. She contributed to the Oxford India Short Introduction Series on Surrogacy, is on the International Advisory Board of several top academic journals, and in 2023, she was visiting fellow at the Department of Global Health and Social Medicine at King's College in London. I also learned today that she's now with the Climate Change Department at IIT as well. Anindita, thank you so much for being back at Climate Conversations. She was here last year as well. And thank you so much for leading this discussion, and all of you for being here. The panel is yours.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes. Okay. All right, welcome. Thank you for this lovely gathering of people here. So honored. Thanks to Urvi, to Shreyas, EkoGalaxy, HLF, to be able to talk to a very august panel here. We are going to start conversations on climate policy, communities, and capital today. We'll start off with, I'll go alphabetically, and I'll ask each of our speakers to talk a little bit about their work so that you can understand what they're working on, and then we can have a general conversation on ongoing issues of crisis. So for Professor Prakash first, if I may invite you to talk about your work on gender inequity, climate change, water resources, your vast, extensive research in these areas. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Anindita. So my name is Anjal Prakash, and actually I'll just start with the meaning of my name. So the meaning is Anna, Jal, and Prakash, food, water, and light. And I'm exactly doing what what my parents have put my name to. It's been about 2.5 decades for me to be working in this issue. I started with the issues of water management initially, and slowly moved into climate change. And my work actually focuses on the intersection of social inequality, climate change, and gender. This is something that I focus on. I have been part of IPCC for last almost 7-8 years now. I've been part of now their cities report, which is focusing on cities and climate change. So just give you some anecdote and some figures from India. Cities actually account for about 70% of greenhouse gas emission in India, and only 2% land that they hold. So altogether, you can understand the kind of emission that is happening. It's also engine of growth. It lubricates growth, but at the same time, it also leaves a lot of carbon footprint, which we have not been able to manage in India. I just came back from Delhi, and thankfully living in Hyderabad for a couple of years, you actually know what actually means to be in a better environment, at least comparatively better. So I landed in Delhi, and I could see, and that day, the AQI in Delhi was about 372. And it hits you in the face when you just land up and you find out that you are in an environment which is probably not as safe as it should have been, and it's a toxic environment. So, and there are a couple of reasons that we see, and especially looking at the political apathy, looking at the kind of intersection of action that should have been required, which has gone wrong. Not that Hyderabad is quite safe. I have been working on the cities, especially the lakes of Hyderabad. In last 70 years, Hyderabad city itself has engulfed about 70% of water bodies. It has series of lakes which was all interconnected with each other. Thankfully, in the Kakatiya dynasty, which was the dynasty 1,000 years before, had actually built up this thing. Nizams who came in later had understood the system, had not meant with that. In fact, they also furthered it. Britishers also did not quite disturbed that system. It's only after independence that we have actually cleaned it up totally. And all these interconnected lakes. So this is something just, I'm not taking more time than this, but just give you some snippet of what are the issues that we can grapple with when it comes to climate change, water management, looking at our own environment, living environment that we have, and the built environment like this, how environment sensitive are we. One just last issue that I'm going to leave up to you. As you drive to Gachibowli, I stay in Sanikpuri, which is much better environment than this. And as you drive, this is going to struck you, especially the kind of glass building that you have. I always say that, these are emulations of Chicago, which has colder and colder climate. And when you are building same kind of building in hotter and hotter climate, hottest climate, you are able, you're not able to understand that it's just imitating, but not trying to understand that what buildings can actually produce a kind of greenhouse emission, kind of AC that you require to cool up these places, which is actually going to heat up during the summer's time. And that is, so I always say that when the builders are building, the architects also should pay a portion of the electricity bill that the builders are consuming all across, and so that it teaches them how to be much more environment friendly. I'll leave these thoughts with you, and we'll come back again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. That was just to kickstart the conversation there. Thanks a lot. Hisham, thanks for joining us. I wanted to know more about methane fix that you've been talking about, and of course your work otherwise at the Environmental Fund.
Sure. So I'll start off by saying that I am one of the guys who live in Delhi. So unlike Anjal's short visit there, when I land in Hyderabad, I go, Exactly. And Anjal started off by talking about names, so let me just start that route. My surname Mundol is often mistaken as someone from West Bengal, Bihar, or Orissa because it's Mundal or Mandal there. I'm neither of those. I'm a Mundol, which is a little village in North Kerala, Kasaragod district, just south of the Karnataka border. Don't even get me started on my first name. If you think it's odd, my brother is called Eugene and my son is called Osher. We leave them out of the picture. Let me tell you about the Environmental Defense Fund, the organization that I work on. It has a very fearsome name, so let me clarify some things. The second word is defense in that. We are nothing to do with the military. The third word is fund. We have no money. Just to let everyone know, we are an NGO. We raise money every year when we deploy. We put the word fund almost like an aspirational thing. It might come through at some stage. But anyway, coming back to the story of EDF. So it was set up 60 years ago by a group of scientists and lawyers in the US. For the first few days of our life, our unofficial tagline, and because there are kids in the room, I'm going to do this a little trickily. Our unofficial tagline was sue the, and it's a 8-letter word ending with TARDS. So you can guess the rest. For the next many decades after that, our official tagline became finding the ways that work. And I talk about taglines because it's not just reflective of individuals and an organization growing up and maturing, but also an acute realization that climate action needs progress and pragmatism over purity and perfection. We don't have all of the solutions, but that doesn't mean that we sit on our backsides and do nothing and pontificate. As an NGO, we believe in science, economics, pragmatism, and partnership. I have news for you. There is no NGO that doesn't believe in these things. But where we try to distinguish ourselves, for example, on the science, is when we get into a science issue, we go really deep in it. We started researching methane 15 years ago when it wasn't on the global agenda. Last year, we took great pride in celebrating that we'd become the first NGO ever to launch our own satellite, something called Methane Sat, to track methane emissions from the oil and gas sector. For those of you nodding in impressiveness, this story doesn't have a happy ending because we lost the satellite a few weeks ago, but that doesn't take away from the fact that we invest in science. On the economic side, and we say this as an environmental organization, it is simply not good enough for something just to make climate science sense. If it's not economically viable, it won't happen. And so you have to find the economic and political and social drivers for action as much as you need the climate science. On the partnership side, and this is a challenge with the climate community where we've tended to be suspicious of industry because industry has caused much of the problem, which is true. But what is equally true is within the control of industry is much of the solution. And companies can move faster than countries when they choose to do so. But we have to find ways of making that happen. And on pragmatism, and I promise this is my last point, I'll come back to Delhi's air quality. I live in Delhi. I don't need another NGO to come and issue a report that we have an air quality problem in Delhi, because I have this magic thing called a window, and I can open the window and I can see the air quality problem. I need NGOs to do other things, to find solutions, to celebrate local champions, to effect change. So that's the kind of approach that we take.
What an entertainer you are, Hisham. Yeah, thank you, guys. Thanks, everyone, for showing up for this panel. I thought when the words like policy, capital, all these are floating in the context of climate, generally, they're deterrents from people entering the rooms. I'm Sathya Raghu. I co-founded Soul Forest. Unlike your environmental defense fund, which is complicated, my name is pretty simple. Soul Forest, we exactly do what we are talking. We find a way to bring humans and nature together. In one sense, restoring humans, nature, and our interconnection. Let me just take a step back. I don't know how many of you heard of this hummingbird story of, so it's a little more Californian story. We'll still talk about it in sitting in Deccan Plateau because we are very close. There's a forest fire and all the animals are sitting quiet, chilling, enjoying, and there comes a hummingbird which picks water with its beak, goes and pours water on the fires. And it just keeps doing this while all other birds and animals were all laughing at it. This story was originally meant to communicate a story of hope, that however small you are, you can still get up and do something, and that still matters. That was a story I believed for about 10 years. But last year, when I was reflecting on the story, I felt something was wrong with the story. At the first place, why are we asking just the hummingbird to save a forest fire? Save the forest from fire. I thought there was something more structurally wrong. And then I started thinking more about it. Definitely, hummingbird is going to fail at that work, even if it inspires hope. The problem, I realize, is not just about a hummingbird. It is not just lack of hope. We have a massive problem of structures, systems, more boring things. Hope suddenly is a more interesting conversation. But I started feeling that nature and climate conversations need to be a lot more boring, lot more reliable, lot more repeatable, lot more like roads we travel on without seeing how the road is made, lot more like the trains we travel on without actually seeing the tracks. We need that kind of durable, repeatable, boring infrastructure, and that we believe can happen when nature economic zones start getting created. We can't just look at nature as a background. Of course, the story says that a lot of people have nature as their wallpapers on their phones, laptops. Of course, understandable. But nature is something more than that. How can nature elevate into a conversation which is a long-term infrastructure? The way we have a shared recognition of roads, airports, now data centers, power, and all this, how can we have as a society a shared recognition of nature as an infrastructure? And the moment we start having that shared recognition, Then go one step deeper. How do we build stories which create adequate percolation into our human consciousness about how nature is our ancestor? First, we'll recognize the infrastructure layer. Then let us recognize the ancestral layer. Just the way we care about our parents, grandparents, and the ones who are related, how do we have a shared recognition that nature is our ancestor? And then start building systems that can create incentives for us to act in a manner that improves the biodiversity of the planet, which is just for our own selves too, right? So that's the mission that we have been on, and it's been fun. We have, just for those who are interested to learn more about our work, we recently published a report which is specific to Deccan Plateau, a protocol, a simplified protocol that can be read by anybody, not just scientists, on how we can turn barren land into a biodiverse forest. It's a toolkit. It's a simplified protocol which ensures that we not only talk theory, but it is a report that comes from our work on how it is possible in a couple of years, how restoration can happen. 50% of wildlife increased in the area where we are working right now in Telangana. And if that doesn't give hope, not too many things in the world can. So I'll pause here and hand it over to you, Anindita.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. That was so interesting. And I think starting from that, maybe I can, because we are talking about Delhi, we are talking about conserving the idea of nature more than just an idealized version, as you mentioned. Maybe we can start talking about the Aravalis and a little bit about Delhi and a little bit about how Hyderabad can figure the emerging crisis. So Anjal, maybe you can start, and then Hisham, and then you, Sathya.
Yeah, so I think I leave Delhi EkoGalaxy to Hisham to take it, but I have my own observations. I've been writing also about the thing. I think the one most appalling part of Delhi, especially the air pollution, is the it's become very complex, but when it started, it wasn't that complex. 15, 20 years before, when the thing was hitting, in fact, in Sheila Dikshit's time, she has really curbed with one single stroke of policy that we had, right? But slowly it became, the entire ecosystem in which, and you also have to understand that Delhi is a basket case. So whatever happens around Delhi, and it's not only about Delhi, but entire northwest India, which is including Punjab and the part of things, it's something that is very geographically also prone to pollution, but it doesn't mean that we cannot curb it. The good part is that we have enough knowledge how to do this, right? You just write ChatGPT how to curb Delhi air pollution. It'll give you 5 steps which anybody has an access to. But the problem is this knowledge doesn't lead to wisdom, and also going across party line to do that. I just heard that the World Economic Forum, there was this, one of the comment has come from very senior economists who said that investing in India is not very good because the kind of pollution and the kind of waste management, the lack of waste management in India is going to lead to a lot more problems. So it's also economically not viable for you not to solve your problem. So that's one line that we are taking. I'm sitting in a business school. I can also tell you from the business angle. So I just finished teaching a course called Sustainability and Ethics to a PGP program, a 2 years program, which is just launched. And I ran a MCQ with them, kind of a Slido quiz, and I asked them about the pollution. I mean, there's a debate between environment and development, and which side of the debate are you? People, 80%, to my surprise, in a business school, 80% student actually said that we want to live in a much better living environment, and definitely economics will follow if you protect your environment. And that is coming as a surprise for me, because I thought the students who come and opt for ISB are the one who are those business kind who will definitely extract environment and go forward. And I attribute this to the young people, because I think all of the young people who are here would resonate this to me, that this is it's a very common knowledge and a conscious choice for young people, especially young students that we see now, that environment has to be protected in the way we are in. So that's number one point. Number two is also looking at how do we then link it up to policy and politics of it. And that's where I think most of us, we are failing, especially looking at the way in which the politics of environment management also happening. And I see both international as well as national politics and state politics together. Coming to Hyderabad, it's again, or Telangana, for example, this has been also, as I said, started about the whole issues of lakes in Hyderabad. I've been part of, as another advocacy group called SOUL, Save Our Urban Lakes. And we have done with Triple IT Hyderabad, we had done a study a couple of years before, in fact 1.5, 10 years before, when we looked at the entire, just looking at the satellite imagery of how many lakes survive in last 70 years. And to my surprise, 68% of actually lakes had only survived what was starting point at 1947 when we actually got independence. And from there, even 68% of lakes that survived, they have actually become independent. So you look at the lakes of Hyderabad, and older people will tell me, if you talk to your grandfather, they'll tell you who has lived in Telangana, not only Hyderabad, all these lakes are linked to one another in a honeycomb style. That means in the high point of Kakatiya dynasty, 97% of the water that fell in the area has actually got absorbed by the lakes. And lakes are very beautiful in a sense that it gives you protection both from the flood and the drought. So if there is no water, rainfall for last 3-4 years or 2 years, it will give you water because it is impounds water. When there is a flood, it actually absorbs water in themselves and then let it go. So this is something which has been a beautiful drought management, flood management system inbuilt in our system, which we have not paid heed to. And that is where the problem also lies, that in the madness of urbanization, in the madness of lakes, in fact, I do another presentation called How to Kill a Lake and Earn Billions. Okay? Contact me, otherwise it's free of cost lecture that I can give it to you. And I'll give you how actually you can choke a lake and make almost millions from this whole process because you're selling of land. And I'll also tell you names of people, politicians, local politicians, contractor, all those who actually can connive and give you things. This is what we have done, right? So there's another side, but probably that is what, just to, in a satirical way, just to tell you that how important lakes are. Just coming to the last point, Anindita, is that there is an international politics also of climate change. And I've been part of some of the discussions where the issues are quite divided between global north and global south. And I'll come back to you to give you a little more anecdotes further. But this is not easy. I've been part of an urban chapter in the last assessment report. Now, urbanization is happening, the growth of urbanization is happening all across in the global south, much more in Africa and Asia. In the entire chapter, where 15 lead authors were there, 3 of them were from US. 2 of them were from so most of the people who were there, about 90% of the people who were writing the report for the entire world were actually whites, okay, who had no understanding of how global change is happening, especially in urban cities and things. I was the only one who was representing South Asia, and there was a Chinese who never spoke. Because every time she has to speak, she has to call up their ministries to find out what is exactly that she can speak. So this is how Chinese also work. So you can imagine the load of you, each one of you, if you're ever part of to be any of the global assessment, you also have a huge load to carry the flag of Global South, which is also going to be very difficult for you to defend, especially when it comes to the North and the South divide that we have. The Americans and the Europeans have keep on polluting. They will never be reprimanded to pay for the money for the pollution that they brought. About 90% of the choking of the Mother Earth has happened from those people, okay, the whites, and I can call them all. But they have never reprimanded for that, right? So over to you now. The politics also comes in.
Thank you. Hisham, I just wanted to particularly, thanks, because the segue is right there while you're talking about activism, especially with relation to the Defense Fund, Environment Defense Fund. What role do you think citizen science has right now in this current situation? What would you advocate? What would you ask for, especially when you're saying NGOs shouldn't be taking on the responsibility that now I think we should be taking on as citizens?
And unfortunately, let me get back to Delhi and just build on the example. So let me tell you what has not caused the Delhi air quality problem. It is not farmers in Punjab burning stubble. Does it contribute? Of course it does, but it is only a 20% contribution. There is an 80% that's happening. It just so happens that in November, December, it kind of peaks. So one, farmers in Punjab are not primarily responsible for Delhi's air quality challenge. The second is the Delhi chief minister on her own cannot fix the Delhi air quality problem. It is just not possible. The kind of solutions that we are looking for are not based, the air travels across the jurisdiction of a city. The third, and probably the most concerning factor, is survey after survey of citizens in Delhi points to the fact that air quality is not up there as one of the primary reasons. And let's face it, politicians respond to that. If the air quality challenge in Delhi becomes a topic for the Jorbagh and Golf Course Road elite to discuss for 3 weeks in the year, which politician is going to worry about that? So I think those are the things that you have to think about. And I completely agree with Anjal. If I go to someone and say, climate change and air quality are going to kill you, you're losing this many years of your life, this is what's happened to you, etc., natural human reaction is to switch off. And you have to find calmer, saner, more science-based ways of saying, this is what the challenge is, this is what can be done, this is what you can do as an individual. You want to take an example of what individuals can do? How many of us are segregating waste at their doorstep? I live in an apartment block in one of those condominiums. I know how hard it is to segregate waste. And if you segregate waste, you can reduce downstream methane emissions from the awful landfills that we're there. But we're not, and we have to. So there's one other point which is completely unrelated to this. I wanted to mention in my first point, there's an annual climate jamboree called the COP, where all the high and mighty people land up, and there are these panels about every issue on climate change. If any of you follow it on social media, you'll notice one really striking thing. All of the panels, they'll only show you pictures of the panelists. They never show you pictures of the audience. Do you want to know why? Because oftentimes the panelists outnumber the audience. I make the point because there are 100 of you here. So Urvi, can you please make sure that there's a picture of the audience with, and the message that Hyderabad rocks goes out there on a Sunday morning. So thank you for coming.
Yeah. Please, I want to know more about how Soul Forest imagines this citizen activism.
Just want to continue from where you left, Hisham, which is always difficult. Been to these COPs, Davos of the world, and I think there is one thing that really, there's one clear struggle that we all experience as individuals, where on one hand, we want to feel hopeful that we can make something happen. We can create a difference. We want to change things the way to the extent we can, right? That is one part of us. And the other part of us is just the sheer size of the problem. And the question around, is there really something I can do about it? When you swing too much on, of course I can do it, you lean towards toxic optimism without doing anything. Sab theek ho jayega, right? It'll happen because I'm hopeful, right? It just doesn't happen only with hope, right? Hope has to be backed by sincere, boring, repeatable, everyday action, which is where a lot of people feel comfortable to talk about climate and nature once in a while, but doing anything about it is incredibly hard. It is incredibly boring. It is incredibly taxing, not just on the physical health, but also on the emotional health in terms of how you deal with this. If I ask a question, Hyderabad has a KBR park. How many of you here believe that even a city like Hyderabad, we talk about Outer Ring Road, which is a savior. Now we talk about a radial ring road or a regional ring road, which is outside this, we say Hyderabad is growing. How many of you honestly believe that Hyderabad deserves 100 more KBR parks? Can you put your hand up? And how many times have you heard a conversation about this? How many times have you triggered a conversation about Hyderabad needing 100 more KBR parks? That's exactly where all this breaks. And then comes the question. Sure, is it really possible to solve these problems? Is it possible? Here is the good news. It's not coming from toxic optimism. I would encourage you to read this. There is an organization called Project Drawdown. Thoroughly science-based, distilling all the scientific insights for ordinary human beings like me to be able to say, hey, is it possible to really solve these problems? And here is the good news, everyone. 80% of the solutions actually benefit the pockets today and save the planet today and tomorrow. It is not like, oh, you have to pay a green premium to be able to do that. 80% of the climate solutions, like the waste what you spoke about, it could be energy, it could be waste management, transportation transition. A lot of these save money today or benefit you today and save the planet today and tomorrow. We don't know about that as much. We simply keep saying, oh, there is a big problem, we need money for it, we need resources for it. Hey, 80% is right there. Are we doing that? Even in that 80%, there is a gap. On the point on air, what you said, we are building Soul Forest a couple of hours from Hyderabad. I thought, when we were doing our baseline surveys, that, oh wow, that's such fresh air. Here is a good and average news. 2 hours from here, next to a beautiful 400-acre lake with almost 1,500 to 2,000 acre of ecosystem which is pristine, our air quality in that area is just okay. Our air quality in that area is just okay. It's safe. It is not the best, it is just okay. That suddenly got me thinking about why 99% of the world is breathing unsafe air. We talk about AI, we don't talk enough about AIR. And AI can survive only when there is nature. We need reliable water infrastructure, reliable cooling infrastructure. Only then can the systems be built. So it's not like we can say, hey, we'll figure out, Swiggy will deliver, our life will be fine. I'm sorry, Swiggy has to deliver something that is grown. And something is grown only when the nature is intact. And that action, what an individual can take, the last point that I don't want to make is something that I learned last week, which filled me with immense hope in Davos. A lot of times these are blah blah and nothing really happens, but there was something profound that stayed with me. In the last 6 years, as humanity, our investment into nature-based solutions increased 11 times. In the last 6 years. Just imagine you invested money and that money grew 11 times in 6 years. It's great, right? 10 billions was what we were investing as a planet, which is peanuts, into nature-based solutions. Today, about $110 billion is what we invest as humanity into nature-based solutions. Now, here is a good news. If we sustain this for 10 more years, all this conversation about we don't have enough capital for climate solutions, all these can be addressed. But that sustaining for 10 years is no small thing. And that will happen when there is individual consciousness. And to add to the point what you said, look at the manifestos of people in Netherlands. A politician has to go to the people and say, this is the climate action what I will take. And then that person gets voted. Look, that's coming because politicians respond to the incentives of voters. And we have a role to play. If 100 voices decide that for the next 3 years, you will do your bit to get the climate agenda, nature agenda out of your super selfishness. You're not doing anything for the world. This is out of your super selfishness for your own self. If you get this information out to the world, and if you are constantly communicating it, not to communicate despair, not to communicate toxic optimism, but to communicate hope, stories which are based on truth, science, and a narrative which gives energy for us to be able to do it, I think we'll go a long way in potentially solving this.
Thank you so much. This is a massively passionate panel you're all listening to. Thank you for coming. I think we should open this up for Q&A. We have some time. Please.
Check.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Sathya. I pursue actuarial science. So we do a lot of quantification of climate change action. So my question to you is, when Mr. Anjal Prakash, you said that you work at the intersection of social inequality, gender, and climate change. I can understand the correlation between social inequality and gender, but how does climate change come into the picture in this intersection? That was my question to you.
Thank you so much. It's a very good question. I didn't have time to explore this further, but thanks for asking this question. So what happens actually, if you see when society is definitely divided by the couple of genders, not only male and female, but others also. But what we have seen, and my work especially shows that the women are at much disproportionately impacted by climate change. You know, you see what is happening in, for example, agriculture. It's one of the major sectors where climate change has stricken already, right? Most of the major agriculture sector actually has feminized totally in most part of India, what we have seen. That means the burden of agriculture has been slowly shifted to women, and they are facing the brunt of, say, lack of water management. You know, this entire season has shifted to about 3 weeks to a month, and that means that when you want rain, the rain will not come. When you don't want, it will pour, and this has impacted many sectors. But definitely, women are who are at the forefront of this process has been this benefit. That's number one. Second is also about the access to water has also been, especially in the rural areas, what we have seen is that because of climate change and the heat impact is happening, access to water, especially the water quality has been deteriorating, the water availability has been much lesser, and this is all impacting women, especially especially the lower caste women, the poor women, that is also happening. So we are looking at it from the what we call a perspective where intersectional perspective, where you also have poor men and women who are disproportionately impacted by a changing climate. And if you have to just see, they have not contributed an inch to a climate change process. If I'm a poor woman from Jharkhand or from Telangana, somewhere in Karimnagar district, I have not contributed to anything. In fact, my lifestyle is carbon negative. But I'm actually getting the vagaries of the nature changing, and that's where the close lies. So what we are looking at is the climate justice framework, that you look at it. Can the justice be done to people who are disproportionately impacted by change, and can we also compensate them through many means? That's what it is.
One follow-up question, Mr. Anjal, to that. So you talked about women increasingly being involved in the agricultural sector.
Can you just give the mic? At least I can't hear.
Mr. Anjal, just a follow-up question to that. You talked about the women increasingly getting involved in the agricultural sector. So are you talking, from that perspective, are you talking about just a psychological burden or also monetary and access burden? Because the men also will take a hit on the monetary and access.
Yeah, so time is very short. Let's have this conversation in the sideline. But just to give you, there's an increased feminization of agriculture. That is the literature is showing. Unfortunately, we didn't have the latest census, which would have also shown this. But let's have this conversation done.
So what we'll do is we'll take 3 or 4 questions together, and then we can... I'm loud enough, I think. I guess you're passing on. Sure, please go ahead. I just want to share. So just a second, sir. So we'll take a question there, then we'll take
Thank you.
yours, and then we'll do another.
No, very broadly, I mean, you touched upon equality on the agriculture and so on. I mean, let's look at this. I mean, farmers not able to, and I'm an organic farmer. I was into environment areas, and I was a finance journalist. I was a finance journalist as well. Now I'm an organic farmer. There is a lot that farmers actually can contribute to by not damaging the environment, one side. coming to broaching upon the inequality that you're talking about today, Hyderabad, Kokapet is one place where you have an FSA of 5, even exceeds 5. I mean, this is a kind of a load that, urban areas cannot take. The setbacks, but then you have high-rise structures. Ultimately, effectively, the FSI is actually 5. I don't think this happens anywhere in any urban area in India. How do you handle this? The infrastructure load that is actually happening can have a long-lasting effect. In fact, the rich people are going to Kokapet. The inequality actually exacerbating the situation is one thing that you said, but actually the rich are actually contributing to it. The buildings are not green. They're not happening there.
And can you please just keep it to a question?
Since the spotlight is on Delhi, which is of course very worrisome, there was a published news item in the Times of India which says, in fact, Delhi has put in a lot of efforts and there has been improvement in the AQI as compared to what it was earlier. In the context of making a statement that other states, like Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, for example, 2 states, here the AQI has been deteriorating and we are somewhat complacent that, we are much better than Delhi. So the efforts are happening in Delhi, unfortunately, because of, like you rightly said, so many Ghaziabad and surrounding areas and all. So it's a call that all other states have to put in equal efforts. The spotlight has to be in the entire country, not only Delhi. That's it.
Sir, you have a question?
So the question actually to Hisham, you talked about the need for voters to demand that. So, but we are not seeing that at all. And election after election, it's about that Ladli Bahan and Mahalakshmi schemes which are winning. So is there any hope, at least in the next elections, what is your perspective going forward of this being actually an electoral issue?
Shreyas, you want to take the farmer question and Hisham, of course. Yeah?
There's one more. Would you like to take the one? Yeah.
Yeah, so this is for Sathya, Raghu. So when you mentioned that you are looking at converting barren lands into green spaces, so how much additional water stress does that add to that particular region? Especially if we look at areas where there are huge, like gated communities and high-rise buildings coming up. They are already under water stress, like there are shortages in summer. And at least during the growing phase, it's going to take in more resources before it can really have a positive impact. So what is the proportion, like how significant is that and how is that dealt with?
I'll club both your questions and answers. So one, with respect to the density in places like Kokapet, what we're talking about, I think FSA has a debate in terms of it concentrates population, it also concentrates the infrastructure creation possibilities, and maybe you're outsourcing a part of the natural resources to some other regions for this region to be able to afford so many humans. I'm not an expert in urban planning, and I don't think I will be able to answer the fairness of it, but I do feel there is more nuance of why that has been happening and why there is injustice which is experienced in Bombay and other places when FSI is low. And the moment FSI opens up, there is a lot more equity that people do perceive comes in. So I'll just pause it there. And to your point on water, so one of the things that I want everybody to note is we're building this biodiverse forest, and for about 200 plus acres of restoration that is happening, we are not depending on bore water. About 2 crore liters, 20 kilometers of water systems have been designed in that space, like trenches, bunding, and bunch of infrastructure. It's a pretty intricate ecosystem of water management, because of which I would encourage you to visit to see how this is happening. We are able to do the restoration without actually depending on bore wells. So that's a story for somebody to learn from, and you can get a glimpse of that from a small, pamphlet which is here. When you're going, you can take that. and scan it, you will learn about the restoration process. Yeah, thanks.
So what gives hope? We live in a parliamentary democracy, and often you hear about landslide victories, etc. Those are landslides in terms of seats, assembly or Lok Sabha seats. But the actual winning margin is usually under 5%. Why is this number relevant? Because every year, for the next couple of decades at least, the number of first-time voters, 18-year-olds and above who are voting for the first time, they add up to more than 5%. Okay? Roughly, 50-50 boys and girls. Now, young people have been much, much more concerned about this issue because they are seeing the impacts of it so much more. And they are realizing that, old fogies like us are going to go sooner rather than later, but they're going to have to pick up these pieces. I hope for all the 20-ish year old people out here, how many of you know what an inland is? 20-year-olds? Oh, somebody knows what an inland is. Excellent. Tell your friends what an inland is. Tell them how much it costs. Tell them to buy 5 each and send one to each of the major political parties saying, I care about climate change. I'm a first-time voter. I'm going to decide who to vote on based on this issue. And then watch. Eventually, people will respond to that. Acknowledging that when I said climate change is not up there, what are those issues that are up there? Employment, inflation, women's safety, these are all real issues. They are not issues that you can wish away. So it's not about not looking at those, but it's about having a thoughtful, constructive view of it and framing it as an economic case. You can make a lot of money by doing the right thing, but start doing the right thing.
Can I just add one? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish.
If I may just add one point to this before you respond to the next one. I think we need to humanize climate action. It can't be something else. It can't be someone else's problem. It is an education problem, health problem, food security problem, and the moment it's an infrastructure problem, the moment we humanize it in terms of how your day-to-day is changing and will change, and even for governments, you don't have to create a dramatically new budget category. Your education budget, that's why I'm saying climate conversation has to be a lot more boring. It has to be a lot more embedded into the existing architecture of how our lives are. This should not be a new box. It should not be a new building. It should be a part of every education department, health department. All these policies have to have their tweaks in the light of climate action. That's how I feel the real impact happens, not when it is a siloed, separate department which doesn't talk to other departments.
Yeah, I just want to respond to the rich being responsible for the degradation that we're having. I totally agree with you. I had done a study when this entire Gachibowli area was developing about 2 decades before. When they planned this entire area, I'm sure all of you, I'm not sure if you know about, they planned all the things, but they forgot 2 things, which are actually basics of urban planning. They forgot where is the water going to come from, and where is this, when you flush the water, where it will go. So water and sanitation were 2 things in this in the entire area where we're sitting had been forgotten for years and years, okay? So I did a study because what happened is for the supreme rich who came and who did an avatar in Hyderabad, took up all the houses which has required 24/7 water access, where will they'll get the water from? So water started to fly in from the nearby locations. So the study which I did along with a couple of other of my colleagues, we mapped the entire area of Gachibowli, especially the peri-urban areas. We found out that the peri-urban areas have started to go dry. And some villages where the nexus of the local politician, the tanker mafia, and the entire system in which we are operating, they had dried up. Now we have all this Manjira, Kakitiya, all the stuff is coming up, but this has come at the expense of water around this area, and that has to be mined up. One more point, which I'll close it. When the ORR was being made a couple of decades before, they were actually engulfing one of the water bodies, the area. So we made a representation to the government. We went to the department, we asked them, why are you just cutting the lakes into 2? and not allowing the water to flow, because water has its own entity. Let them allow to flow. They said when we did the calculation, we found that it's much cheaper for me to fill the lake than to make the roadways for the lakes. And that is the kind of knowledge that the departments have. And we could not do. We still know. If you see now, those lakes actually have dried up because you choked them right from the beginning. And these lakes have dried up now. All these housing societies come up. And when the flood comes, you will tell that the water has entered my area. No, you have entered in water's house, and now you're telling that the flood has come. Then pay for it. Thank you.
We're going to wrap up this session. I'm afraid we have another session starting soon. Please stick around for that. But thank you once again. I think Shreyas wants to also give us all a copy of his book, Soul Forest. Thank you for that, and thanks for coming. Thank you. This was a fantastic panel. Thank you.